Доброго ранку.
Good afternoon, everyone who are here with us today and who watch us online. The next topic is on the occupant service, military conscription in Crimea to the armed forces of Russian Federation as a war crime. Our speakers are Yelyzaveta Dzigora, prosecutor of the Prosecutor's Office of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, Vitaliy Nabuhotny, lawyer of the NGO Regional Center for Human Rights, Maksym, Tymochko, Ukrainian, Helsinki Human Rights Union, and Oleksandr, Sedov, analyst of the NGO Crimean Human Rights Group. Welcome. Good afternoon, dear colleagues and representatives of the media. Thank you very much for being with us today at this briefing, because today we raise an important topic connected with the repeated violations in Crimea committed by Russian Federation, and this violation concerning forceful draft to military forces of Russian Federation that is done by occupying authority starting 2015 until now. This violation is committed openly. Russian Federation do not hide this fact, and they continue this, and in 2018 they continue this illegal policy, and during 2017-2018, Prosecutor's Office of Crimea, together with the human rights defenders, Crimean Regional Center for Human Rights and the Crimean Human Rights Group and Helsinki Group, we collected evidence and we provide the document to international criminal court, and we hope that Prosecutor's Office and that this crime will be investigated, and this case will be brought before International Criminal Court. First of all, we would like to speak about the context in order that those who are present be able to understand the problem. Everything started in 2014 after annexation of Crimean Peninsula. Russian Federation spread its legislation throughout Crimea, and legislation on criminal responsibility and legislation that envisages the draft of those citizens who lived in Crimea. At the same time, all citizens who lived in this territory, in occupied territory, they were forcefully recognized citizens of Russian Federation, and on the whole, together with the military draft considerations, this created the situation for the draft for these citizens, and occupying power first created the system of military register. They created military commissariats according to legislation of Russian Federation, and Crimean Peninsula was under jurisdiction of Southern Military District. This is military formation that is responsible for mobilization for military service and the use of them in military operations in other territories, and service in the whole territory of Russian Federation. During this time, we collected facts, and Russia and citizens they are forcefully mobilized, and there is repressive system that was created, and there is criminal responsibility for draft evasion. And if you do not serve in the army, if you ignore the notices from military commissariats, so criminal responsibility awaits you. There may be some fines, and also you may be deprived of liberty. And all this is negative in the context of the adherence to international humanitarian laws by Russian Federation. And now my colleagues are going to tell you about the evidence collected and what we expect from the address to International Criminal Court. I give the floor to my colleague Oleksandr Sedov, Crimean Human Rights Group. So we addressed the office of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, and we should provide some facts and evidence, and our group had a task to collect this evidence, and we collected 165 legislative acts that confirm this. These are the orders of the President and the Minister of Defense and the laws that allow to carry out draft in these territories, and also reports of administration about funds allocation to deliver conscription in some areas. Also, we collected 199 publications, both in the media and on the sides of administrations, and they say who is responsible for conscription, and there is information about the number of conscripts, and military commissariats provide report about the number of conscripts in conscription campaigns, and also we created the list and the number of people who were conscripted in different regions to see the whole picture from what regions these conscripts were drafted. Also, we analyzed more than 2,000 pages on the social media, and we found many evidence that people who are the citizens of Ukraine, who were the citizens of Ukraine during the time of occupation, they were conscripted in the Russian army, and they used the uniform. There are photos of these people and military detachment of Russian Federation. And we may identify in what detachments Crimeans serve. And also we found 57 notes of conscription that provide information by which military commissariat they were conscripted, so the responsibility may be established on all levels, starting the president and until the commissariats. We found 9 orders about the honoring of these people with medals for their participation in military actions in other areas. They use these people for in military operations outside Crimea. And also, these people, they are forced to do this. We analyzed the court hearings in Crimea, and on 30 verdicts were provided by courts for draft evasion, and 5 cases were heard in the courts. And now we know that 33 verdicts were provided, and there are cases that are heard now, and also several cases were closed by courts. And in 3 cases, people admitted their guilt, and they said publicly that they are ready to serve in the armed forces of Russian Federation. So the number of verdicts increases, and we see that conscription is ongoing now, and they want to conscript 3,000, and this violation by the Russian Federation, it continues, so we are going to continue to document those crimes. Thank you, dear colleagues. I would like to speak about historical aspects. History knows such facts when some people were convicted because they carried out such conscription, including in the occupied territories. The most interesting example for us may be the Gauleiter of the Nazi Germany in the territory that was occupied, the territory of Alsace. Dr. Wagner, who in 1944, he provided a decree on general conscription for Germans who lived in the occupied territory of Alsace, and this decree, it was spread to the occupied territory of Luxembourg and Lotharingia. And why the situation is interesting for Crimea? The fact is interesting because parallel to this decree on military conscription, several days before this decree was issued, another decree was issued to for the occupied for the occupied territories, for the French citizens in Alsace. First, the citizenship is imposed forcefully on population, and then draft is established. And we see the same situation in Crimea. And you know what was the end of Mr. Wagner. You may check this information about him. He was brought to criminal responsibility by Nuremberg tribunal. And one of the points of his accusation was that he forcefully imposed citizenship on these French citizens, and that he drafted them into the Nazi service. And this is not the only precedent. There were other precedents concerning other top officials of the Third Reich. Gottlieb, who was one of the top officials at the Ministry of Eastern Occupied Territories during the Third Reich. So the history knows such examples and such actions as a forceful draft in the ranks of the occupying state. If we are speaking now about Ukraine, so these actions, they should be punished, and we do everything possible together with our colleagues in order to provide such evidence to proper international institutions. And separately, I would like to note that often the draft is the source of other international crimes, such as there is data that was provided to International Criminal Code. This data shows that some people, they left Crimea because they fear that they will be drafted, and we may say about another crime as forceful displacement of population. So this character of enforcement in this draft, when a person is physically is not displaced due to some bodies of power, but this person just in such an atmosphere that forces this person to displace. And as we know, more than 30,000 IDPs from Crimea left Crimea, and there were many young people who displaced to the mainland Ukraine in order to avoid draft. Also, there are other international crimes, and according to the Rome Statute, there are some persecutions, and people are criminally persecuted for draft evasion, and this person is persecuted by the occupying power for these illegal actions. According to international law, this is a crime, and also we may say that parallel to draft, also there is a crime of illegal prosecution. About statistics, my colleagues mentioned, on the whole, we have information about thousands of such conscripts, 3,000 of them, and this information was taken from official sources of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. All those sources, they are mainly open. That's why we continue to monitor the situation, and I believe that in the future this data will be added, and we'll share the data with relevant international court and quasi-court institutions. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to say that during occupation, occupying state, according to international law, has some obligations it should adhere to. Such obligations and prohibitions, they are established by the Fourth Geneva Convention, and they should avoid any draft to occupying army and Russian Federation. As in previous examples, it does not adhere to this norm, and draft continues, and my colleagues mentioned about this. So this is the military crime to conscript people to the service of the armed forces of Russian Federation. And the official notice was sent to ICC by Prosecutor's Office of Crimea, together with the NGOs, representatives of which are present here today. And this notice, it has this evidence, these facts, and we voiced the essence of this evidence. And also I'd like to say that all those evidence that were mentioned today, they are objective and they are implemented in the framework of criminal proceeding, and this proceeding is carried out by Prosecutor's Office of Crimea. Now, these documents are systematized, and these documents, we have the volumes of such documents, and we will add documents to these cases. And the most important that the office of Prosecutor's Office of ICC, it will start investigation in Ukraine, and this office will provide additional facts and will address the organizations and Prosecutor's Office, and we should be ready to provide additional materials for investigation. And also, except those evidence that were voiced, important evidence for ICC are the evidence provided by the witnesses and victims of illegal actions. And the Prosecutor's Office of Crimea deliver an important work in this area, and these evidence are provided, and they are put in the protocols, and we have enough of them. I won't go into detail, and I won't say about the figures because investigation continues, and we cannot voice this information. And also I would like to say that ICC does not provide for prosecutors or NGO. They do not provide timeline for provision of information and additional information. But we have clear strategic plan of actions concerning timeline for provision of information, informational notes and additions to them. And this is done systemically with the view. We had 3 information notes on other military crimes, and we may add additional facts, and this is the basis and precondition in order to convince the Office of International Criminal Court to convince them to start investigation in the territory of Ukraine. Also, there is clear understanding of a subsidiary mechanism of ICC. In any case, the Prosecutor's Office of Crimea believe that this bringing to responsibility is prerogative of international court. We understand this, but top officials of Russian Federation, they are involved in these crimes, and we do not have proper access to the territory where the crimes were committed. And we believe that this is the work of the investigators of ICC, and we hope that we will be able to cooperate with the ICC in the territory of Ukraine, and we hope that we will be able to do this really soon. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. And now Q&A session. If you have questions, please. Olena Rymovska, Radio Liberty. I have a question. Could you explain the procedures, the stages of this procedure. So you submitted the document, and there should be investigation by the Office of the Criminal Court. But could you explain it in simpler words in order that we understand what you expect? Thank you for your question. Yes. First, we should clearly understand that the whole procedure that is envisaged by the Rome Statute, and according to which all the structural units of ICC act, including Secretariat and the Prosecutor's Office of the ICC, and if they act according to clear procedures. There are some stages. Now we are at the preliminary stage when the office studies the information notes and evidence that confirm the crimes that were committed in the occupied territory. According to the results of the study, the prosecutor of the office, and we hope for this, he may take decision about the necessity to start procedure and persecution in the territory of Ukraine. And they can create the representative office here, and the representatives of the Secretariat of the Office of the Prosecutor of International Criminal Court, they may work in this territory. And I won't tell you about the all stages, but this is our intermediary goal, to start this investigation when we reach this goal. And this investigation is started, and we will have proper cooperation here with the prosecutors of ICC. So we will then have another stage to provide the documents to ICC, and we will wait then for the decisions in the cases to bring people who are guilty to responsibility. Now we provide this information notes, and we wait for the start of investigation in the territory of Ukraine by the prosecutors of ICC. So now we are at the stage of preliminary study in Ukraine, three situations: Crimea, Donbass, and Maidan cases. And this information will be of interest to the court. If it is interested, then there will be a case open to investigate the case, why the participation of the governmental bodies and NGOs is important in cooperation with the court. When we see the situation with Georgia, the preliminary stage about Georgia took 7 years. There are many reasons for this, and of course Russia delayed the process. It took 7 years for prosecutors to speak about the Ossetia and Abkhazia case, and also this cooperation is important in order to convince the prosecutor that these cases are happening in Ukraine. And also it is important to maximally work in all situations in Ukraine, in all cases, because there are grounds to believe that prosecutor will submit such a document to the chamber of prosecution when he will have evidence about such crime, not only in Crimea, but also about Donbass and Maidan. So maybe not all the cases will be started at once, but there are grounds to believe that about Crimea and Donbass, they have such evidence, and we need to work in these areas further in order to provide additional evidence for these cases. I would like to say several words. So history knows about such examples, and as our colleague mentioned, about Nuremberg process cases after the Second World War. But we should note that in the practice of ICC, and based on the Rome Statute, this will be the first case that will be in the ICC. There were no analogous cases before, and we cannot compare it with the Nuremberg process. This is the history, and this can be some precondition to have this practice and to prosecute this crime. But in the practice of ICC, and according to the Rome statute, this is the first case that will be considered, and we should have patience and wait, because for the prosecutor's office, this will be the first experience, and they will need time to work through all these elements of the cases, and they will need a lot of time for this, and we will wait for their response. We won't create illusions for you that this will be done in 2 or 3 years. And I would like to add about what was said today about responsible persons. And maybe it is of interest to you, because for us it was important not just to mention who will be responsible for these crimes. For us it was important to show political and military structure of Russian Federation, because top command and command of Southern District and general staff commanders, they will change during the time that Russia Federation occupies Crimea, and will continue conscription. So in this submission, the authors reflected this political military situation and showed the movement from the order of the president to the military commissariats that are in the occupying territories. So this order from the president goes first to the Minister of Defense through the General Staff that establishes the number of people who should be drafted, and this information then sent to the Southern Military District, and Southern Military District provides directives and orders to Oblast Republican military commissariat that is on the occupied territory, and through this commissariat they send directives to draft the residents. And the structure was provided, this information about the structure was provided to the office of ICC, and we understand that the list of responsible people, this list will be changed in years, and now we are speaking about those commanders, those officials, and we've mentioned the Minister of Defense, the commander of the General Staff, and the commander of the Southern Military District, and the head of Military Commissariat of the Crimea and under occupation. ATR channel analyst Tsuk, I have a question to Prosecutor. So why yesterday they didn't detain Russian delegation concerning SFC fishing, and do you know what is the fate of these Russians who went on the covered Russian number plates, and why they were access to Ukraine? Because they went to Crimea in violation of Ukrainian legislation. Thank you for your question. In order to be maximally correct, I will be short in my response. All these facts of illegal crossing, they are recorded by the Prosecutor's Office of Crimea. In this in this case, I'm not ready to go into detail in order to be correct. So please address to our press service for information, and they will provide response quickly. Do you have other questions? Crimean News Agency. I would like to have an explanation about Ukrainian legislation. Is there responsibility of those who serve in the Russian Federation Army? Because there are people who are forced to serve and they served, and there are other people who voluntarily, by contract, served in the armed forces of Russian Federation. So how do you consider the responsibility of those conscripts? And also 3 preliminary addresses to ICC. They were not about conscription, or maybe there was additional information about conscription in those addresses. I will start with the second. So preliminary 3, they were not about conscription by Russian Federation. They were about nationalization of the state property by occupying state and the occupied territory, and deportation of civilian population, and also illegal transfer of imprisoned persons from the territory of occupied Crimea to the territory of Russian Federation. Concerning your first question about responsibility, of course, there is clear division when we are speaking about illegal activity of occupying power, occupying administration, concerning enforcement, forcible conscription. We are speaking about war crime, and in Criminal Code of Ukraine there is a separate article in the Criminal Code of Ukraine. This norm is provided, and it refers to the number of Geneva Convention, Hague Convention, where these documents provide information about these military crimes. And also when we are speaking about citizens of Ukraine who by their own will join the ranks of Russian army, I would like to make a remark for citizens of Ukraine who are there. Bringing to criminal responsibility, speaking generally, there won't be criminal responsibility for this. Separate cases will be considered, and the facts will be established, because we cannot speak about it on the whole. And these actions of separate cases will be studied, and then we will understand that there is or there is not, or there is no crime in the actions, and then it will be established whether this person will be brought to criminal responsibility. So we may not say that these people on the whole will be brought to criminal responsibility. No, this is not the case. Several words from me. So we may say definitely that serving in Russian army by conscription, it is not a crime. And in the context of Crimea, and in the context of the situation that is ongoing, this forceful conscription, the conscription for military service in the Russian army, this is not the ground for losing the citizenship of Ukraine. You know that recently there was presidential draft law, he returned it later, about the deprivation of citizenship, and one of the grounds for this deprivation was the service in the armed forces of Russian Federation. But it is important to say that conscription and draft, according to the law on citizenship, it is considered as forceful, and this can not be a ground for deprivation of citizenship. Dear colleagues, do you have other questions? One specification. You said that 9 facts, established facts of honoring those individuals with medals for their military service outside Crimea, other facts of using such people in Donbas. We may confirm that there is information that people were honored with some military awards about the use of Crimeans, of conscripts in Donbas. No, we do not have such facts. Some citizens of Crimea and the citizens of Ukraine, they participate in actions in Donbass, but we do not have facts about participation of those who were drafted by Russian Federation in Crimea. This is an important question you raised, and this will be one of the work of the NGOs, and my colleagues may agree with me. There is such an opinion that Crimeans who fight in Donbass, some people say that they are there for some purpose, that there is some mobilization center, and Russian Federation trained them, and they sent them to Rostov first, to the border with the occupied territories, and used them in the war against our state, against our citizens, and the practice of international humanitarian law do not have such bright examples of this. We do not have proper basis to rely on, but there are proper grounds for further analysis and work, and we are going to continue this work. And now our analysts, they gather data about those Crimeans who fought in Donbass, and we are going to do this in the future. And now, as my colleague said, there are no established facts about the conscripts who were drafted in Crimea that they use in Donbass. And this is not probable, because Russian Federation, they have their regular forces that they use in war in Donbass, and for them it is more beneficial to use for auxiliary service. They are not used in military actions, but to serve the regular army that carry out active military actions, like in Syria. They served on the fleet, and this fleet support actions of Russian Federation and Syria. One question from me in continuation of your reply about what about the death of those people who died while being in service in Syria or in other places? There is information, and this information is from the media and from the official sources and publications at the official site of administrations. Some people perished, those who served by the contract, and they were officers of Ukrainian army first, then after occupation they served for the occupants, and they were sent to Syria and they died there. So we do not have the data about those who served as conscripts, and some residents of Crimea who served on contracts died. And what about the figures about those who served on contract? No, I'm not ready to voice those figures now. Do you have other questions? If there are no, and the speakers do not have further remarks, thank you. And this is the end of press conference. Goodbye.